Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of vBrownBag. Tonight we are continuing with our Commitmas episodes for December.
Perfect.
Yes, thank you very much. And this evening we are very excited to have Mr. Matt Brender talk to us about curating. Excuse me, hold on one second. Flip back. Curating a group of people that build tools together. This evening, our hosts are going to be myself and Jill Jubinski, who is brand new. Hi, Jill. And
hi.
Please get in on the conversation. If you Twitter hashtag vBrownBag, we will be paying attention. And for the people that are live in the audience, use the Q&A forum, and we will make sure that we get all of your questions to Mr. Brender. We are also at our end of the year giveaway. So if you go to vBrownBag, click on the blog section and look at the first link, you'll see that we have a ton of awesome giveaways from all of the sponsors for vBrownBag. We've got some really, really fabulous stuff in there, which I cannot put in for at all. So, you know, wow. And as I said before, this is Commitmas. So if you hashtag vBrownBag or hashtag Commitmas, we will be paying attention to it on the back end. And we are very excited, once again, to have Mr. Matthew Brender. So let me turn it over to Matt. Make presenter.
Show my screen, exit my email. Everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes, we're good.
Fantastic. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to a third year in a row of Commitmas. I can't believe it. So I'm really happy to be presenting a little bit of what I've learned as somebody who curates people through open source tools and through GitHub. But I'm definitely sticking with the Commitmas theme, so we're going to do a quick review of the history of the project. And I'm going to give as many tips as I can without being boring. So there will be a few, and then we'll get right more into questions, and then I'll point directions where we can keep in touch if you have specifics. So agenda, I want to look at Commitmas actually as a case study of curating people, because it's really interesting to differentiate what you see as somebody who might be interested in the project versus what happens behind the scenes and what inspires us to keep going. From there, we'll go over some principles that I find truly important to, you know, keeping your energy up in open source and in really any project that you're curating multiple people. So where do you start when you're thinking about open source and contributing? How do you lead people once you find a tribe that you want to be involved in? And then how do you sustain the momentum? So let's start with what's right in front of us, Commitmas. Got a little calendar in front of you starting in December 2014, and there's going to be two sections to it. Above the line is going to be what you see. So basically, what have we done? What's been noticeable if you've been following this? Below this line, I want to tell you what made it happen. So who are really the inspiring or catalysts to making us continue to do Commitmas the way we have? Just a couple years ago, I had a goofy idea to make a pun about Commitmas, about Christmas and about commits, and it started as Gitmas, and then Commitmas sounded better. And I just wanted to gather some friends and talk about learning the basics of coding together, because version control is such an important element to stepping forward into anything where you're treating infrastructure as code. And I come from that sysadmin background, despite having some computer science to me too. And I'm really passionate about all of us moving forward and seeing that every bash script that we've ever written and every little Perl snippet can go into version control and we can be better at what we do by using this. So a few of us got together, and the whole goal was to have a streak. It's for 12 days straight, the 12 days of Christmas, we were going to commit and push some stuff to GitHub together. It didn't have to be useful, it just had to be consistent. In the background, though, I don't think this would have happened if it wasn't for a community member, Josh Cohen, vBrownBag contributor as well, starting up a Slack group and starting to invite people to it, and getting us to start having that communication channel where we could start organizing both publicly and privately, publicly through through Twitter and privately through the Slack channel and start asking those questions day in and day out and realizing we have like a space to come together. So fast forward a year later, this crazy idea comes to pass where the vBrownBag is going to host 30 straight days of presentations for all of this December in 2015.
Madness.
And Jonathan Frappier and Rob Nelson absolutely made this happen. They loved the idea of Commitmas, and they had the time to do it, and I didn't. And they took ownership of it and ran with it and made this happen. So that was in the foreground. In the background, though, you might not have seen that sneaky sensei, Cody Bunch, lit a fire under all of our asses on GitHub. He commented on, he opened an issue on the original Commitmas GitHub repo that ended up getting 60 comments of people being like, yes, this can be a bigger deal. This does need to be something that invites far more of the community together and continues it. So if it wasn't for Cody, I don't think I would have continued any sort of Commitmas idea. I thought of it as just this fun one-time thing. And I know it inspired Jonathan and Rob to step up and really lead this community forward. So I think that's an amazing understanding of how this continues. Now let's look at this year. We have 5 teams that are all focusing in and looking to communicate and collaborate together on a lot of infrastructure as code, automation tools, as well as some scripting languages. But again, behind the scenes, I got to give it to him that Taylor Regan tweeted, the first presenter of this year, and I highly recommend you go review his presentation. The first presenter of Commitmas this year was asked to present because he was the reason that we did it at all. We were kind of floundering around about whether we were going to do something or not do something, and he tweeted at me and I'm like, you know what, we really should, what are we going to do? And then again, Jonathan and Rob stepped up and ran with it. So I think there's something really special about looking below the surface of what keeps us moving forward and what the momentum is, and it really it starts with just a cheesy but very true note that it's all of us. It takes a huge village of people pushing forward in order to keep learning. And also it matches a need that we all need to keep learning how to use version control so that we're ready for whatever comes at us next in the IT world. So where do you start as you're thinking about this? And I'm really going to get back to basics here because as exciting as all the different tooling and teams is of 2016 for Commitmas, I want to be that guy that goes rah, 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 let's remember our roots here. Because when somebody says to me, be a little pessimistic for a second, I'm learning Git to contribute to open source, what I really see and hear is something along these lines. And if you read through the not-so-subtle hints here, it says, help, I'm trying. But what's a method? Because I feel dumb. Because we continue, and the inspiration of this entire project, but also we continue to do so, the misappropriation of what it is to learn version control from what it is to learn the markup language for the version that you put in the version control markdown, from learning a particular scripting language, from learning a particular framework on top of the scripting language. And before too long, we're learning about 17 different things at once, not knowing which one's which and why my head hurts and why you feel so dumb. I certainly have felt dumb more times than not in the last few years playing with this stuff. So my first major tip, if you're looking to get further involved and less ashamed of what you aren't doing, is focus. It's a boring, plain old term. I don't have any pretty GIF or anything here. It's just focus. So what I mean by focus in this particular context is understanding the separation of these tools. Git and the syntax of Git isn't of itself another interface that you have to understand and be comfortable with the basics of in order to for it to be a gateway to bigger projects. So it's not learning to code. You're not learning to code if you're playing with Commitmas and you don't know Git syntax yet. You're just learning Git because they're not the same things. And one of those things that it feels trivial, but I no longer feel stupid saying it because I've had so many smarter people than me complain about it as well, that Git is not even learning Markdown. Markdown while not super complex in reality, it's challenging to understand the nuances of it and to write it without looking at the cheat sheets that are online every single time you're trying to link to another page. So remember that these are all separate goals, and there's no shame, and it's actually even encouraged to separate out those goals and start seeing them as separate entities. So my method to do so, which has really been about a 5-year project and going, to be totally honest, is to move from learning Git and only Git to then using Git as a way of committing Markdown to projects. So writing documentation on GitHub effectively is what that's been, to learning to contribute to other projects while learning Markdown, because Markdown is not something that's so easy to get the first time. So you'll start contributing to projects, you'll see a documentation issue and the project is open source, so you know you can go contribute and fix that typo, you can fix that incorrect syntax, but how do you do that? You have to first unpack these layers. And last, and very last, is to start digging into some of these coding skills that you may or may not want to be picking up. Now, you don't have to work all the way through this to add value to your day-to-day life and to your coworker's life. But if you do want to get to that 4th layer, you have to work your way there. Or you're smarter than me. But if you're finding yourself frustrated and confused at times, it might be that you're misappropriating how challenging each one of these pieces are. So when starting, start simple. I have the very first repository I made on GitHub for myself is just called Playing, and here's some commit logs from Playing. It's absolutely ugly. It's something I would never, ever, ever do on a project I wanted to really contribute to, but I also didn't know what I was doing yet. So what I would do is put a text file in there. I'd drag and drop an image and put it in there, and I'd practice, git add dot, git commit -m message, git push, and then I'd probably learn that I didn't set up my remotes correctly, so I'd end up on Stack Overflow and trying to figure out what a remote means for Git. So just working through that in a playground, give yourself the playground, give yourself an ugly, no-holds-bars repository that you will smash on now and again. There's no shame in that, and it's really helped me in the long run. And I still go do that if I have to figure out, a more complicated thing now and I don't want to screw it up in a place that's important. I'll go rebase like crazy in an old repo and not worry if I have to blow it away. After you get past that point, you're at the choose your own adventure stage. So you feel confident about the basics of Git, you have an understanding of Markdown, and now you're like, you know what, I really want to contribute upstream to a project. There are some really cool things out there, this open source thing, whether you're checking out what's the projects coming out of VMware and Dell EMC, or whether you're excited about Docker or Kubernetes, or you want to hang out with me on a project that we're doing at Intel called Snap. There's a lot of places to choose. So none of them are bad ideas, actually. Every single one of these communities, every single one of these projects has a growing number of people that want to contribute to it. And there are people like me who are putting a ton of effort in their day job. They're very fortunate to put time in their day job to help you contribute back to them. So just pick one. You absolutely can, and understand that picking one doesn't prevent you in the long run from going somewhere else, but it does put you down a path where the further you go down a single path, the more skilled you'll be. The further you go breadth, the more well-balanced you'll be, but not deep. And you have to choose your own adventure there. What type of engineer, what type of skill set are you looking to acquire? And again, a cheesy thing, but somebody I will always quote and be thankful to quote is Tolkien, who recognizes that just because you are wandering around to different projects and looking at different things all the time, that doesn't mean you're being ineffective, as long as you focus on the principles that you're trying to learn and keep applying them over and over again. Next step for me, you've got a good basis yourself, and now you really want to see if you can scale it by leading other people. So just a few tips that come to mind in particular is nothing has been more important to me than visualizing the work. I find the more ideas I have trapped in my head, the less likely it is that anyone can contribute, because I have made myself a bottleneck and I've prevented anyone from having the same vision as me. So the more I can break work down and share that on some sort of Trello board, or GitHub now has projects, or even just putting them in issues on GitHub on a repository. And then the last icon is for Waffle.io. Before GitHub did this stuff, Waffle made a Kanban out of your issues. But visualizing that work, putting them in columns, that gives you an opportunity to start distributing out work and allowing other people to be part of that story, part of that vision. So I find that particularly Kanban methodology of visualizing work and optimizing for throughput as opposed to busyness of individual people is really effective at scale. So a lot of terms in there, but like now that GitHub has projects out of the box, I would just start there and really start adding to your backlog and recognizing that every single project, every single repo on GitHub is iterative, so it's always okay to have backlog. And then once you have some backlog, you can start asking for help. And help is a wonderful thing. It's both a vulnerability to have to be somebody asking for help, but it's also an excuse to connect people to a bigger project. So recognizing that every time you ask somebody for help, you're also giving them an opportunity to help you, which will make their day. And if they do so, it'll make your day. So I think asking for help, especially in an open source community, is not only expected, but it's appreciated, especially if you make it easy and even fun to help people. The tool that comes to mind for this is what GitHub has with labels. So the project that I'm a maintainer of is called Snap, and we have a few different labels on there. It's a plugin architecture, so we break out what type of plugins you might want to create, and we created this concept of a wish list so that we put it out there into the world, like these are a bunch of plugins that people have asked for that we're not committed to making just yet. If you want to make it, that would make somebody's day, and we play matchmaker between that. You'll see one label that's common between us and the Kubernetes project by Google, which is Help Wanted, which is becoming a very strong convention in open source to recognize that this is work that might either be not a priority or easy enough to do that we want somebody else to do it so that they can get their feet wet with the project. Also really like on a project as massive as Kubernetes, which has tens of thousands of issues at this point because there's so many people that are excited to use it. For new contributors is an amazing tag to look out for, because you'll find the little low-hanging fruit documentation issues and user issues that you can get involved in. And you can get your code committed into these massive, massive projects in just a little amount of time if you start looking at the right labels. And you have the basic syntax of Git and pull requests under your belt. So, okay, now that you feel more comfortable leading people, you've given a few ways that they can lead, how do you, as an individual that by definition doesn't scale, how do you sustain that momentum without exploding? I find I spend more and more of my time designing guidelines than I do fixing issues. And it's not out of lack of desire to fix issues. I think it's really fun when I ignore the world for a day and just code something that's cool. But I find I am most effective when I'm focusing on a few documents that allow other people to see our shared vision, know the basis of why we exist, understand how to contribute in a meaningful way, and have an understanding of what is our goal. What is the one goal that we're after, and why, and allow them to choose to either see themselves in that goal, or actually say, like, you know what, that's cool and all, but I'm not aligned on that goal, so I'll go elsewhere. All of these are important because at this point, it's not a field of dreams adventure out there in open source. Just because you built it in open source, it doesn't mean anyone will come play with it or use it or help you use it, because there's so many projects out there. So I think focusing on these guidelines and helping people contribute is really important. One example that I use as a call out here when it comes to mission statements, which can be an awkward thing to tackle, is that I think HashiCorp nailed it years ago with their DAO of HashiCorp, which talks about why they think the tool chain that they're building is important to the industry. And if you read that and you're inspired, then you're probably going to go try to contribute to their open source projects. And I think that's a brilliant method that I would like to see other major initiatives, even the vBrownBag, doing. Because a shared vision can lead to distributed leadership, because people all know that we're aligned to the same direction. And then the most practical tip of this entire deck is to reduce your noise. As soon as you start getting deep into GitHub, it's kind of like the first time you use Twitter, where Twitter by default will email you every time somebody tweets you and email you every time someone follows you, which is nice at 2 people, but it sucks at 1,000. GitHub's very much the same way. Like when I was first starting, like having an email every time an issue was opened up was kind of exciting. You're like, oh, people see my things. Now it's annoying, but it's not its fault, it's mine. So the one rule I absolutely live by is make this notifications mail in whatever inbox you're using. So I filter out everything that's not tagging me specifically into a subfolder that doesn't go into my inbox. So only the emails coming to me from GitHub that have my username, or I also have another filter based on, we have a shared maintainer tag that we use that we want to monitor. I make these filters in email because whether we like it or not, no matter how great Slack is, email is still king in these situations. So reducing the noise is the only way I've been able to sustain participation across multiple projects at once without just hating everything. And last on the how to sustain is to be thankful, and that goes both directions. Be thankful when somebody is thankful to you, and if you're a maintainer, always assume that people are doing things to help, and that everyone's interest is to be thankful and to help a broader community. This is a thread from, I opened a pull request on Homebrew, which is a really great package management project for macOS. And I was kind of nervous because the first couple pull requests I've opened on some projects have gotten stomped on, where people are like, no, this is useless, or you did this wrong, or something like that. And that happens. This team was just so thankful. They merged it. I think I even had a typo in it, and they just merged it and fixed it themselves after, so they didn't make me rework it. They were just super, super kind and really excited that I had taken the time to work on some documentation for them. And I am so appreciative for how appreciative they were that when I have free time in my day, I look through their backlog to see if I can maybe fix something. And I think that positivity that you can bring to any community will sustain it for the long run, and it scales far beyond an individual. So in conclusion on that front, accept that no matter how thankful you are or how good you are at leading a community, you will be hated. You will be hated for things that don't make any sense, and you'll hate people at times for reasons you don't understand. But just accept that it's kind of part of it, because open source is a lot of humans, and humans have emotions that occasionally go off all haywire on us, just like Vader's insides did sometimes. But I'm losing my thread here. Just focus on the positivity, and you'll get a lot of value out of this. So that was the major part of the presentation that I wanted you to take home. But there's one more thing in a kind of Apple-esque kind of way, that I'm of the Jewish religion, and I started a project called Commitmas that's focused on more of a Christmas theme. And I've actually wanted to do something about that from year one, but it just kind of had a life of its own. But I'm seeing a need this year, so I thought about adding a little extra layer on top of the Commitmas community by asking Bubby. Now, for those that have not been around as many Jewish people, Bubby is a Yiddish term for your grandmother. And oddly enough, this exact doll is on my desk at work, thanks to Nicholas Weaver. He bought this for me, and it's adorable, and it inspired me to think of how do I scale Bubby.
I want to side note for a second. I know about this because this product was on Shark Tank, and I'm super obsessed with Shark Tank.
This is on Shark Tank.
Yes.
I'm actually ordering one right now. $19 on Amazon.
It's worth every dime.
I'm buying it right now.
Your Bubby would be proud.
Are you
okay? So for Hanukkah this year, I'm going to spin off a little sub-project called Commitmas. So in our Slack channel, in our Slack team, there's going to be a new channel called Commitmas. And every day from December 24th to January 8th, the 8 days of Hanukkah, Bubby is going to remind you to share code and to focus on the basics and to focus just on Git and a little bit of Markdown, but really just get back to basics. So if you want to be, adorably nagged by a Jewish grandmother throughout the Hanukkah season, join that channel and play around with my really terribly coded Slack bot, but also just get back to basics. And I was thinking of this because I don't want anyone to feel intimidated by how in the last few years we've grown in scope and scale. And I wanted to bring it back and center it back into just getting a streak on GitHub and getting that muscle memory put together. So if you feel like you could use some more muscle memory and getting back to basics, play along with Commitmas this Commitmas season, and let's get multi-ethnic up in here. So with that, thank you so much. Happy to take some questions, or always happy to talk over Twitter and Slack to help out further.
All right, so let me pop up. Mr. Cody Bunch says hello, and he says it sounds like you've just volunteered to write the Tao of vBrownBag. Not a question.
Who would? Genius.
All right, it looks like the attendees are not hitting me up with any questions.
There's some twittering.
Yeah, I was, like I said, Cody's definitely doing his thing. Cool. Jill, do you see any?
No, I don't see any questions. I have a question though.
Go for it.
So as someone like in the technical community, but I've never coded before, obviously you talked about intimidation factor a bit, and so even doing things on GitHub seem like a large hurdle. So where do you point folks who are just I'm in an interesting position because I have a pretty good understanding of technology, but I just can't do any of it. So where do you point people from that regard? How do they get past that barrier?
Yeah, the fear factor is huge, and I think I sadly don't have one place where I just say let me point you there and it'll all seem easier. But I do want to point out one feature that I really like about GitHub lately. So let's go to some project I work on, and let's say you find a typo in this README file. So we click on the README, and you're looking at the README. You're like, you know what this really needs? This needs to say Jill the beginning of it, just because that's just always the right answer. GitHub has a wonderful feature these days up here and gives you a rich text editor right in the GUI. So you can just click edit this file. So it looks a little weird because the syntax is Markdown, but you can navigate it easily enough where, okay, I'm like, all right, this is where I wanted to say Jill, so I'll type Jill. And now I can actually commit that message right here. So because I own this repository as one of the maintainers, I can commit it directly to the main part of the project, the master branch, or I can create a new branch and start a pull request right now. So that means without touching a command line, I can do all of the GitHub interactions with a document without having to understand exactly what's going on, but there's a couple terms I need to know still. You still have to understand the basics of the branching and pull request functionality, and you still need to not be terrified when you see a doc that looks like this. Both of which are very solvable with, oh man, where did I put that? There's a really good way of doing that that popped up on the Commitmas repo. Let me find that while I look. Commitmas 3, I'll leave this page without messing things up. At the bottom of this, there's a few tips. I think get the simple guide. If you just scroll through this very visual, simple guide to Git, I find like you'll be comfortable enough figuring out the basics.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And this definitely has more of a command line view of the world. But yeah, so maybe I could find something better. This is the best one I've thought of because I like the command line, and that's more for the ops people that have been more focused on. This would work. But I think as much as you can do right in GitHub itself, the easier it will be.
Cool. Well,
Yeah.
this is not a question, but there is a comment from someone who said, "Great job," and then like 12 exclamation points. So the viewers are loving it. You're killing it, Matt.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, cool. All right, well, since there aren't any other questions, I did have a little too long didn't read to this presentation where just reinforced the principles that we were putting in place like when we started Commitmas a couple years ago, which starts with admitting that you're trying to learn too much at once, and that's why it's really, really hard. And then complement that by patting yourself on the back, recognizing that you can learn absolutely anything you want to. No one was born knowing Node.js. They just suffered through it longer than you have. And if you want to, you can too. And if you're wondering where else to start to really dig into it, I highly recommend looking through the vBrownBag YouTube videos of Commitmas in the last couple years, especially last year. There's such an amazing lineup of people explaining how they use Git on a regular basis. And then reach out on Slack, which is a URL I didn't put up there, but we have it in the GitHub repo, which I don't have up anymore either. So under Commitmas, if you search Commitmas, we're pretty much the only one, but there is one other thing that pops up these days. I don't know if anyone else noticed from the thread that Michigan University football started a Commitmas.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
This week. I think it's great. The more the merrier, right?
Right.
That is so funny.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so I hope that's really helpful for people to wrap their head around if they're trying to figure out how to scale their participation in these projects, and recognizing that, you know, it really does take a village, and the history of these is mapped by people just raising their hand and saying, "I'm interested. How can I help?" So never fearing that, and recognizing that you can make this up and go for it, and you have an army of people behind you the whole time.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Matt, thank you very much for taking the time tonight. This was very informative. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And a lot of people saying thanks in the Q&A forum as well. Go Blue as well. Cool. All right, guys. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Have a good one.